Okay, this isn't exactly news, but Serum 2 can create some pretty crazy vocal-based sounds, specifically when you draw in your own envelopes. So I'm going to show you how to make this sound. This sound is part of a wider track that I'm working on, a drum and bass track. Every sound in this song I have created from scratch, except for the hi-hats, so the kick, snare, and all the different basses. If you want a breakdown of any of the sounds in this, or like how the mix is made, let me know. I'll be happy to make a video on that. But for now, we're going to be focusing on this sound right at the end. Cool, so I'm going to talk you through this sound and how I made it every step of the way. So we're going to start with the oscillators and work our way through the rest of the signal chain here. So I've gone through this whole patch and disabled everything except for oscillator A, and this is how it sounds just on its own. So typically when I'm making sounds, I will start by setting the oscillators or choosing the sounds. So in this case, I wanted to try out a digital wavetable, so I came to digital and selected one that I felt sounded good. You can't really tell what's going to sound good until you've experimented with it. So in my case, I ended up choosing this anti-stasis one. Particularly with wavetables, the one that you get out of the box is not going to be indicative of how good the sound actually is. So you really need to work your way through the wavetable position in order to understand what this sound's actually going to be like. So I should note that when I'm making a new sound, I basically never have any idea what I'm going to make in my mind. I'm not good at being like, I want this sound, and then making it. I can do it for basic things like Reese's or whatever, but generally the only way I'm thinking about a sound is what sounds good right now and what can I do to it? How can I iterate on this thing to make it sound better? Actually, the only thing that I ever think about is the envelope. Like, is it plucky? Is it going to fade in? Is it going to have a long release, etc.? That's basically the only thing I ever think about when I'm starting a new sound. In this case, I did nothing. As you can see, it's a big old box. So back to this anti-stasis one. As you can hear, as I'm kind of working my way through it, what I liked about it is it's very subtle, and it just has a little bit of sort of very subtle distortion, particularly up here. As I was doing that, I was kind of just moving my mouse and ended up doing something like this. I kind of liked that. There was something rhythmic about that. So I ended up mapping an LFO to this exact thing. And this is where it got a little bit crazy. I drew this out, obviously. I kind of mapped each one of these points and made it sound like it did in my head. I was using the rhythm of how I was moving my mouse on that wavetable position to determine what might this end up looking like. I played it to a beat so that I had a frame of reference to understand rhythmically how this was going to sound. But at the end of the day, all I'm trying to do is add character to that oscillator. And this ended up being a very, very critical part of this patch. So coming back to that wavetable position, I'm going to re-enable LFO 2, and that gives us this. Pretty interesting. For this second oscillator, I was looking for a sound that would sort of complement the anti-stasis sound. So something that was low, rumbly, but had a little bit of that sort of distortion fizzle that I was looking for. Before with anti-stasis, it sounds like this. But layering on the bottle blow, it sounded like this. So straight up, I knew that that kind of buzzing sound was what I was looking for. However, it's a little ugly, obviously, as it always is. So if I just move this, I'm going to disable. I disabled anti-stasis 1 so we can hear this on its own. I really like that it morphs between the fizzly sound and sort of more of a clean sine wave. Layering that with this guy sounded really cool. And usually if you're layering a couple sine waves on top of each other, it sounds kind of bad. But in this case, because the anti-stasis thing has a couple peaks of the sine wave instead of it being a just plain clean sine wave, I think, yeah, cool. It ended up being really interesting and ended up adding so much weight to the bottom end. Got to mention on oscillator A, but I set the phase and randomness to 0 so that it starts the same way every time. But on this guy here, I increased the unison because I wanted it wide, kept the phase at 180 and randomness all the way because I want it to be a little bit random. I have a little bit of tuning happening on LFO 2 in the same rate as the wavetable position 1. Honestly, kind of doing nothing. It's just more sort of analog warmth. I'm sorry for using that term. And so on the wavetable position, if I re-enable this, it's using the exact same oscillator as before, this guy here. And together, these oscillators sound like this. Pretty cool, right? It's got this like growly sound going on. I think it's sick. Before we get into oscillator C, because I know you're all dying to hear it, I wanted a special shout out to noise and brown noise, also known as poop noise. This is stereo width all the way, and we are increasing the level of it in tandem with our LFO. Now, this isn't some sort of life-changing sound. It's really just an additional layer to what we already have. So it might be a little hard to tell, so I'm just going to turn it off one time with it off. And with it on. All it's doing, and this is very intentional, was trying to support some of the higher frequencies. So with oscillator A and B, there are areas within the wavetable where we get little bits more of higher frequency content. So all these little kind of tiny edges are more high frequency. And then obviously on oscillator B, this is essentially all high frequency, right? So in order to help accentuate that, a little bit of brown noise. The reason it's at 65% is when I turned it all the way up, it was a little overbearing. And maybe it's okay, actually, now that I'm hearing it back. But when you're doing stuff like this, I have found it really useful to make sure that you leave just a little bit of headroom so that when you get to the distortion stage or the effect stage, you're not going crazy. Because if I have the level all the way up, I'm distorting that higher end even more, and it's gonna sound like hell. All right, finally time for oscillator C. So this is where the voice comes in. I'm using native curse, which is one of the vowel wavetables down here. There's only a few wow wavetables. There's only a few wow wavetables available within Serum 2, so go and get them while they're hot. On this one, I am, as you'll see in a moment, doing some wavetable positioning. But before that, I've set the phase to 0, randomness to 0, and unison's up to 3. So actually, let's play it without the other guys first. Okay, so without the other oscillators, it sounds like this. And as we work our way through the wavetable position, you'll hear it get kind of interesting. I'm particularly fond of the wavetable position right at the very end and going backwards because it sounds like it says, why? Or even better, wow. All right, so layering this on top of the other guys sounds like this. So then, as you'd probably expect, I'm going to use the same LFO that we've used for literally everything else and mapped it to the wavetable position, giving us this. And then I wanted to try something else using the FM mode. So I set FM to A, and it gave it more sort of sparkly sounds. Ah, that's too much. That's too much. But just using the LFO to make it peak about here ends up with a pretty cool sound. So all that's really doing, the same way that I'm using the brown noise to introduce a little bit more high end, the FM synthesis here is doing the same thing. The warp mode, sorry, FM warp mode is, I got called out by the by the help text there. They're like, no, Adam, it's actually warp mode, not FM synth. Anyway, adding just a little bit of high end sounds pretty cool. Kept filtering pretty simple on this thing. So everything is being filtered, all the oscillators, actually except for noise, because I wanted the higher sounding frequencies from the noise to remain and not be filtered out. But it's a low pass frequency filter thing. I don't know, words are hard. And all it's doing is using the exact same thing to modulate the cutoff of this. So as you'll see, it kind of just feels like it lets some of the words through, and pulls it back when the words have been said. So that's the basic sound. At this point, I wanted to show you what it looks like on the frequency spectrum. So I've got an EQ8 here. So as you can see, the bottom end up until about 1K-ish, it's pretty solid, but it's lacking a lot of this top end, which is fine. Like, that could be what you're after. But as I was developing this sound, I wanted it to be huge. I wanted it to be like a showstopper sound that takes up the entire frequency range. That way I can cut out what I don't want. And generally when I'm doing sound design, I feel like it's better to have a wider frequency range sound, so something that hits all the frequencies of the spectrum, so that during mixing, I can make the decision that I don't want the top end or whatever, right? So we need to do something about this area here. And this is where all of these effects are going to come in. Every single effect that I've added in here is basically to serve the purpose of either increasing the frequency spectrum range of this sound or squashing it so that it sounds bigger. So to introduce a little bit more sound up the top end here, I've added a distortion on hard clip mode so that the peaks get squashed, with the drive set to, wow, 74. Before distortion and after distortion. It's still kind of subtle, but we've added just a little bit more to the top end. Don't worry, we're going to increase it. Next, I've added a compressor, and this is essentially just the out-of-the-box multiband compressor set to this threshold. I'm pretty sure the default parameters here are OTT, basically. So you can modify these, you can drag and drop them and whatever, but I'm pretty sure they're just OTT out of the box, and that's really what I'm looking for. Mix is 56% or so. I didn't want it all the way. Sounds like this. So without. Yeah, above 56% sounds a little too much. But again, I'm trying to essentially squash some of the highs in with the lows so that we can kind of have a bit more of a level sound. Next, I've added convolve. Don't really know why I said that like it was a question. This is set on the pencil mode, and I think there's basically nothing changed here as far as I can remember. And the mix is set to 26%. I'm going to turn it all the way down and turn it all the way up so you can see what's happening here. Basically, this is putting it into a room, sort of. See, that sounds rough to me. That sounds rough. So pulling it back a little bit. So I landed on 26% because I felt like it was a good balance between the sound that is being contained, so the pencil sound, and just the raw sound. Guess what, y'all? Another distortion. think it's basically exactly the same as the other one. So it's a hard clip set to 70% and mix all the way, which gives us bang. Much heavier sounding. And as you can see, we've got more of that top end. You see, before it was like down here. And now it's peaking kind of around there. It's still not enough though, still not enough. Which is why I have done this insanity, which is a huge shelf filter, 14 dB on the top end. That sounds way better to me. And finally, I've added just a standard compressor. So single, threshold, whatever, who cares? It's a compressor. All we really care about is how big this bar gets. That was a good level for me. Pretty good level. So before we have any of the effects, this is the raw sound. And then if I turn them all back on, this is the sound. Don't forget to go crazy with effects. I feel like it's so easy to make all these oscillators and add your filters and stuff and be like, why does it sound like it sucks? It's probably effects. Add a bunch of effects. It'll make you happy. Or not, I don't know. I'm not your therapist.